Keith Olbermann has a new video series for GQ, and he's someone that I'm now ashamed to admit that I used to look up to. So in one of his latest videos, he did the establishment's bidding for them and decided to join in on all of this Russian hysteria. Now, his take, it's a wee bit hyperbolic to say the least. So take a look and then we'll discuss why he's become complete and utterly unhinged.
We are at war with Russia. Or perhaps more correctly, we have lost a war with Russia without a battle. We are no longer a sovereign nation. We are no longer a democracy. We are no longer a free people. We are the victims of a bloodless coup. So far, a bloodless coup engineered by Russia with, at best, the traitorous indifference of the Republican Party and Donald John Trump, a man who, to borrow a phrase from another December long ago, will live in infamy. In 5 weeks' time, unless desperate measures are taken, we will hand over the government to a man who lost the popular vote by more than Woodrow Wilson or Jimmy Carter won it, a man whom the Russians wanted to run our country for them, a man whom the Russians got to run our country for them, a man for whom the Russians interfered with our elections, which if we did it to another country would be described as an act of war. And in this country, we have conceded defeat. Some experts, John Kasich's strategist, John Weaver for one, have compared this to Pearl Harbor. Even the hard-right ex-Congressman Joe Walsh says Republican silence will be tantamount to treason. Some others, too, have proved courageous. Trump, self-destructive to the last, issued a childish statement mocking the CIA, but as Tim Dickinson of Rolling Stone noted, not denying anything. But the vast majority of Republicans have said nothing. And the vast majority of Democrats have said nothing. And the vast majority of the media has said nothing of substance. And the president has said nothing close to enough. The CIA and FBI and Homeland Security, the institutions whose interest in freedom we on the left most frequently distrust, they have said something. They said it first to congressional and Senate Republicans in September. Dire warnings. Warnings that Mitch McConnell and other Republicans reportedly buried. Warnings that the Russians, using computer hacking and perhaps other means, were not merely trying to discredit the election, but to achieve the specific outcome of electing their man Trump.
He lost his mind. And what's sad is that, he probably watched it back and thought, man, I killed it right there. That was passionate. That was fiery. That was great. No, that was embarrassing, man. So the first thing he said was, we are at war with Russia. No, we're not at war with Russia, and I don't want to go to war with Russia. Do you want to go to war with Russia, Keith? Are you willing to pick up a gun and fight them? I don't think you are. You're in your cozy studio right now bitching about what the establishment tells you to be angry about. No. Now, he also says, we are no longer a democracy. We are no longer a free people. We are the victims of a bloodless coup. So far, a bloodless coup, mind you, because it might be bloody, engineered by Russia with, at best, the traitorous indifference of the Republican Party and Donald Trump. So let me get this straight. You're angry that the Russians undermined American democracy because they exposed how the DNC undermined American democracy? I mean, it's ironic because you can replace anything what you said there with W. Wasserman Schultz and the DNC, and it's basically still true. So I transcribed all of what you said, and when you replace Russia with the DNC, here's how it sounds. We are no longer a democracy. We are no longer a free people. We are the victims of a bloodless coup. So far, a bloodless coup, engineered by W. Wasserman Schultz with, at best, the traitorous indifference of the Democratic Party and Hillary Rodham Clinton. We're all angry at Russia. We're supposed to be angry at Russia because they exposed how the DNC is corrupt and how Hillary Clinton is overtly corrupt and did the bidding of her donors while she was Secretary of State. I'm not saying that I condone hacking and Russian interference, but you don't have any evidence for that. You haven't presented us with the evidence, and if it is true, well, then that doesn't erase the substance. You guys still rigged the primaries against Bernie Sanders. What about that? Why aren't we talking about that? This sounds like a distraction to me, and Keith Olbermann doesn't know that he's just being a shill for the Democratic Party establishment. Now, he also says the Russians interfered with our elections, which, if we did to another country, would be described as an act of war. Now, this was hilarious to me because, First of all indications point to the DNC having an insider leak the information. At least this is what Julian Assange maintains. He says that the emails that were sent to him from the DNC were not hacked, they were leaked by someone within the DNC, and furthermore, John Podesta's emails, well, they were released because he was the victim of a phishing scam. So saying that it's a hacking in general right now is something that we can't necessarily say with certainty. And second of all, even if you can prove that Russia did interfere in this election, what they did is they made information public that should have already been public to the American taxpayer. We deserve to know what the DNC is saying. And third, if you want to talk about interfering with foreign elections, well, let's talk about some of the elections that we interfered with and how that might be an act of war, but you don't want to talk about that. So Iran, Chile, Guatemala, Congo, the Dominican Republic, South Vietnam, Brazil, Bolivia, Honduras, Panama, Grenada, Argentina, and this is not a comprehensive list, by the way. So are you going to speak out against that type of interference into the foreign affairs of other countries? And that's not just elections that we interfered with in these countries. These are, in some cases, regimes that we just outright overthrew. So are you going to speak out against that, or do you condone that? Because as you state in this video, silence is tantamount to being complicit in Russian hackings and approving of Russian hackings. So when are you going to speak out against that? And furthermore, guess who else is in favor of interfering with elections, Keith? Your good pal Hillary Clinton.
Troubled me deeply. I do not think we should have pushed for an election in the Palestinian territories. I think that was a big mistake. And if we were going to push for an election, then we should have made sure that we did something to determine who was going to win.
So we have interfered with other people's elections, Keith, but it's okay when we do it, right? It's not okay if anyone does that to us, and it isn't, but it's okay if we do that to other countries. You're a hypocrite. And then he goes on to cite how even some Republicans are against this and how silence is tantamount to treason. Hey, Keith, I wonder why the Republicans are on your side. Could it be because their defense contractor donors might stand to gain something from a new world war? So that's not even an argument. And by citing their comments, you lose credibility. And then he even condemned President Obama. He said the president has said nothing close to enough. Obama has said that the United States will retaliate. What more do you want? I mean, I don't get the end game of all this saber rattling against Russia. Do you actually want to go to war with them, Keith? Because it really sounds like that. And look, here's my question to you, Keith. Aren't you curious why all of the government agencies that you cited won't release the information for the public to see? Aren't you wondering why President Obama hasn't declassified this information? I mean, did you not learn your lesson already? Government agencies told us that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and they did not present us with the evidence, and just by taking their word for it, we got into one of the worst foreign policy blunders in American history. So are you really willing to do that again, but with a country that actually does have weapons of mass destruction? If so, you're just a lunatic, and you don't think for yourself because you used to work for MSNBC, which is the propaganda wing of the Democratic Party, so you accept what the establishment tells you and you don't even question it. And look, even if we can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Russia did hack the DNC, and it was a hack and not a leak, well, they confirmed what we already knew. We already knew that the DNC effectively rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders and created an election that was tailor-made to exclusively benefit Hillary Clinton. They forewent the usual get out the vote campaign because they didn't want to help Bernie Sanders. They literally moved red states up on the primary schedule because they knew it would help Hillary Clinton since she was the more conservative candidate and it would give her an early lead. And they also limited debates, and then they restricted candidates from participating in non-DNC sanctioned debates. They also colluded with the media to craft narratives that would harm Bernie Sanders. So I mean, if you're angry that our democracy was compromised, then maybe you should be more worried about the domestic traitors that we have in this country that pissed off their own base, which ultimately gave us Donald Trump, Keith. So Russia didn't have to hack us to tell us what we already knew, that the DNC favored Hillary Clinton, that Hillary Clinton was overtly corrupt and that she did favors for donors to the Clinton Foundation as Secretary of State. They just confirmed what we already knew, what was obvious to sane people that dared to question the Democratic Party. And see, if the Democratic Party wants to prevent this from happening in the future, then take steps to improve cybersecurity. But the most important takeaway that you should have gotten from this election, Keith, is that Hillary Clinton ultimately lost not because of Russian interference, but because her own base wouldn't come out to support her because of the election that she rigged, the primaries. So I mean, for once, Keith, just dare to be brave and think for yourself. Question something that the establishment tells you. And also, lay off the PCP a little.
As things are today, January 20th will not be an inauguration,
but rather the end of the United States as an independent country.
It will not be a peaceful change of power. It will be a usurpation, and the usurper has no validity, no credibility, and no
authority under the Constitution.
This is a reality that will become the only reality until this country rids itself of Donald John Trump. He is not a president. He is a puppet put in power by
Vladimir Putin.
And those who ignore these elemental existential facts, Democrats or Republicans, are
Traitors to this country.
and will immediately and forever after be held accountable. Resist.
Peace.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.